So what on earth is Chiron? I want to introduce you now to the archetype that holds the key really to this whole Chiron journey, and that is, from mythology, Chiron was known as a centaur. So a centaur is half man and half horse, although in different visuals that you might see, sometimes he has got two front legs of a man, and other times he has four legs of a horse. But unlike the other centaurs, which were quite wild and unruly, this particular centaur in the legend was known as someone very wise, very noble, and also deeply spiritual. And he was known as a master healer and a teacher of the heroes at that time. Yet he carried a wound himself that he could never fully heal. And so the paradox of this story is what makes the story so profound. His wound, Chiron's wound, became his wisdom. And so in Greek mythology, or in the Greek myth, the centaur Chiron was the child of the Titan, the immortal Titan, Kronos, otherwise known as Saturn. And the mother was Philyra, which she was a sea nymph. And when Chiron was born, he was born half man and half horse, and the mother was really ashamed of him and rejected him. So it was actually the sun god Apollo who adopted Chiron and raised him together with his sister Artemis, the goddess Artemis, and they taught Chiron healing. They taught him all about music, and as well as hunting and fighting. And as he grew up, though, despite this adoption and despite his immortality, he actually ended up living as an outsider. So he retreated to a mountainous cave, and he grew up there in the Pelion region of Greece, if you're familiar with Greece. And so from this cave he taught many students, and he was renowned then as a physician, as a hunter, as a warrior, as a musician, an astrologer, and as a leader. But then his story took a turn for the worse when there was a disturbance, a violent disturbance among some centaurs, and I think he was trying to intervene, and unfortunately he accidentally got wounded with a poisoned arrow. And then this painful wound wouldn't heal, so he retreated to his cave, and eventually Zeus, otherwise known as Jupiter, permitted Chiron to end his suffering by giving up his immortality for death. So that's where the myth, the Chiron, the wounded healer, comes from. And then the actual term was then coined by the psychologist Carl Jung, although he actually mentions the wounded physician. He doesn't actually mention the wounded healer, but he's the first person to coin this idea in 1951. He wrote an essay, The Fundamental Questions of Psychotherapy. And then later on, the term the wounded healer came about, and this concept spread beyond medicine into spirituality and just healing in general. His idea was quite simple. The best healers aren't the ones who necessarily have it all figured out. They're the ones who have descended into their own darkness, sat with their own pain, and done the work on themselves. So it's the wound itself that then gives you the capacity to truly help someone else. So, as Jung put it, it is his own hurt that gives the measure of his power to heal. And so he believed that a healer who hasn't faced their own wounds can only go so deep with another person, but someone who has genuinely wrestled with their own suffering, then they carry an empathy and an understanding that can't be taught. And they know that territory. They understand it completely because they've lived it. He also cautions, though, that the wound never fully disappears, and that's really the point of this. It isn't somebody who's completely fixed, it's someone who keeps learning. They keep doing the inner work, and they use that ongoing process as the very source of their own healing power. So, in short, your wound is not the thing that disqualifies you from helping others. According to Jung, it might be the thing that actually makes you very capable of it. He passed away in 1961. And then in 1977, it was then astronomically that Chiron was discovered by Charles Cowell. And originally it was referred to as a planetoid. And then Chiron was considered too small to be a planet. It was thought to be too bright to be an asteroid. It was too big to be a comet. And it's also thought to be a Kuiper belt object. And it's also referred to as a centaur as well. So it's known as many, many things, but the orbit is between Saturn and Uranus, so the outer planets. So in our solar system, Saturn is the furthest planet away that's visible with the naked eye. And then after that we have Uranus, Neptune and Pluto that lie into the more mysterious regions of space. And so Chiron is also seen as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. And one of Chiron's astrological themes is that of the bridge, or the shaman, the one that connects us to the known world with the worlds of mystery and the unknown, so connecting and bridging between these two places. Now, most planets have a very circular orbit and very mathematical if you look at all the planets and the way that they move. But with this particular orbit, it's very elliptical, meaning it's very oval, and meaning that it doesn't follow, it follows more of a irregular pattern. So at one side it is inside the orbit of Saturn, and at the other end it's outside the orbit of Uranus. So it's moving between these two places. And because of this irregularity, it means that Chiron passes through the 12 zodiac signs very differently. In some cases it's moving slowly. In other cases it moves through the zodiac signs faster. And in total it takes 50 years to make a complete orbit. It's also worth noting that Saturn itself is a planet that represents boundaries and limitations and responsibilities, but Uranus represents more of that uniqueness, sort of the rebellion or revolutionary energy. So Chiron also is seen as pulling on these two energies and working with these two energies. So when you're looking at your own Chiron, then there will be elements of this in there as well. But because it takes 50 years to make a complete cycle, the Chiron return, i.e. when Chiron returns to the point, to the exact same position that it occupied at the moment you were born, it's around the age of 50. And so if you've been doing the healing work all along, your Chiron return doesn't have to be very painful. But if you have been maybe repressing your wounds, oh, I had to sneeze them. So if you have been if you've been repressing your wounds up until this point and you haven't perhaps done the inner work, you have avoided confronting certain things that may have been coming to the forefront, and you've just really been focusing on coping, and you've been ignoring possibly some unhealed pains, whether that's emotional or physical, because Chiron can actually cause physical pains and physical ailments. Then your Chiron return will be at a time when possibly a lot of old things, old stuff will come rushing up to the surface for you. And so for many people this can feel overwhelming, and for other people it can be a really nice time where they may blossom more. Either way, your Chiron return is really the perfect time to do the inner work, to really face whatever it is that you've been avoiding, whatever it is that you need to work with. Chiron passes through some signs very slowly, like I said before, and others it moves through much faster. And now, if you have your Chiron in Pisces, which will be sort of your mid to late 50s, early 60s, then you would have had your Chiron in Pisces. Chiron in Aries would be somebody aged around 49 to around 57. And those people with Chiron in Taurus, which is happening around now, Chiron is going to be moving into Taurus, has just moved into Taurus temporarily, and then again next year it will move through Taurus for around 7 years. Now, these three signs will have Chiron the longest. It moves through the slowest. So around 7 or 8 years is the time that it takes to pass through these signs. After that, it moves through much quicker. So Libra, Virgo, it can take less than 2 years to pass through them. Gemini, Sagittarius, it's around four years, which is about the average time. So that's also why it's quite significant around this time, because there will be a lot of the population that have Chiron in Aries or Chiron in Taurus. And it's so significant because it happens obviously when we are at that age in that midlife. And perhaps why as well some people refer to it as that midlife crisis, because things do get stirred up. Old wounds will come to the surface to be healed. And so this is the time for you to really help to liberate that. This return is an invitation to reflect on your life story, on the patterns, the pain, the survival strategies, and just begin to start transforming that into wisdom, because Chiron is all about not just healing, it's a moment when you finally understand why you've walked the path that you've walked. And if you can do the inner work and really understand your Chiron wound, then there is immense medicine in that. So the medicine in the Chiron wound is actually then when you can turn that poison into medicine, and you can then help other people who have been experiencing that same wounding. And so that's the magic of the Chiron wound, to understand that wound more deeply, which will then in turn help you to really understand yourself. And then through that and through doing that inner work, you can then help other people. And this doesn't necessarily have to come in a traditional sense. It doesn't mean that you have to become a healer or a doctor or a physician, but it may be something that's related to those fields. It may be something informal, it may be something formal, it may be that you take a different path in life. We can get healed from many different things. So for example, someone who creates beautiful art, this can be very healing for people. So we don't need to think of it in the traditional ways. But I do invite you to look at where your Chiron is, to understand it more deeply, particularly if you are around the age of 50, And if you've already passed into your 50s, so Chiron has already returned for you, then looking back and understanding that journey is still can be extremely liberating and can reveal so much and can give you so many aha moments. So I invite you to explore your birth chart, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, give this video a like if you've enjoyed it, and follow me as I take you on this journey as it moves through Chiron, in Aries, Chiron in Taurus, back to Chiron in Aries, and eventually Chiron in Taurus. And not just for those people around the age of 50, but for the collective energy, this will completely change as well. So I'll talk about this more in other videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.